First documented in 2016, Havana syndrome has taken the conspiracy world by storm. A complex and controversial phenomenon, the illness first hit headlines when it began striking down U.S. and Canadian diplomats stationed in Havana, Cuba. With tensions between the nations already tense, the appearance of this mystery illness quickly cast a shadow over diplomatic and intelligence circles. With a range of symptoms from headaches to cognitive issues, its origins and implications remain elusive. Is one of America's many enemies wielding advanced energy weapons targeting diplomats? Is it a case of mass hysteria? Or something even more worrying? Diagnosing Havana syndrome. So, what is Havana syndrome? Well, symptoms vary, but generally speaking, it's characterized by a spectrum of health issues and primarily manifests as neurological and cognitive symptoms. Those affected report persistent headaches, hearing loss, nausea, vertigo, memory lapses, and difficulty concentrating. These symptoms often manifest all of a sudden with little to no warning signs, creating a medical mystery that has stumped researchers and healthcare professionals alike. Patients showing these symptoms were originally highly localized, all being in Havana, Cuba, but over the years the syndrome has transcended geographical boundaries. In recent years, outbreaks affected U.S. and Canadian diplomats not only in Havana but also in various international locations. Over the last 7 years, investigators from both medical experts and intelligence agencies have looked at potential causes, with a diverse range of symptoms becoming a focal point. So many patients showing different symptoms have made it difficult to identify a single cause. As experts have struggled to unravel the mysteries surrounding the Havana syndrome, conspiracy theorists have come up with their own explanations. Havana syndrome first came to public attention in 2016 when U.S. and Canadian diplomats stationed in Havana, Cuba, began reporting the above symptoms. Interestingly, many of the affected individuals described the onset of symptoms as sudden, often occurring after hearing unusual sounds or experiencing strange sensations. The U.S. government formally acknowledged these incidents in 2017, leading to heightened scrutiny and investigations. Subsequently, similar cases were reported in other locations, both within and outside Cuba, involving diplomatic personnel and intelligence officers. The spread of Havana syndrome to various international settings raised concerns and prompted collaborative efforts among nations to understand the nature of the phenomenon and its potential causes. Diplomats and intelligence officers stationed in China, Russia, Europe, and other international settings have experienced similar unexplained health issues. The geographical dispersion of reported cases adds a layer of complexity to the investigation, raising questions about whether Havana syndrome is tied to specific regions or if it represents a broader, systemic challenge. The theories: officials were initially skeptical of reports of Havana syndrome, but as more diplomats became affected, serious attempts were made at diagnosing a cause. The pursuit of understanding Havana syndrome has generated a spectrum of theories, some of them reasonable, some of them verging on science fiction. First, there is possibility that this comes from directed energy weapons. This is the theory that originally received the most publicity. Advocates of this theory propose that Havana syndrome may be linked to the deployment of directed energy weapons, specifically microwave or sonic devices. It has been suggested that targeted exposure to these energies could result in neurological damage, which could explain the diverse array of symptoms suffered by those affected. Microwaves have been weaponized before, such as in the U.S.'s active denial system, a tool used for crowd control during riots. Next, there is the possibility that Havana syndrome is some kind of mass psychogenic illness, a popular theory amongst the cynical. The mass psychogenic illness theory explores the possibility that shared stress and anxiety among individuals could lead to the manifestation of physical symptoms. Similar to mass hysteria, essentially this theory suggests that patients manifest their symptoms and it's all in their heads. Psychogenic illnesses aren't even particularly rare, with well-documented examples including chronic pain, non-epileptic seizures, somatic symptom disorders, and functional gastrointestinal disorders. Mass psychogenic illnesses, also known as mass hysteria or collective psychogenic illness, on the other hand, are much rarer, but they have been documented throughout history. Maybe it is some kind of chemical exposure, if not an advanced energy weapon, perhaps something a little more traditional. Another avenue of exploration involves the potential exposure of diplomats to toxins or substances. Whether intentional or accidental, proponents of this theory suggest that certain chemicals may trigger the reported health issues. It could also be due to surveillance equipment effects. This theory proposes that the inadvertent effects of surveillance equipment devices employed for intelligence purposes might emit unintended harmful effects. The diplomatic buildings affected by Havana syndrome are messes of Wi-Fi signals, security cameras, and goodness knows what else tech. Essentially, just as some believe 5G rots your brain, perhaps the signals given off by all this tech do something similar. An answer? There have been numerous investigations into the causes of Havana syndrome, with the most recent being a U.S. intelligence agency's report that was released in March 2023. Despite the theories above, experts have come up short and there's no real consensus as to what has been causing the syndrome. Most of the U.S. intelligence agencies agree that Havana syndrome isn't the result of directed energy weapons. There's little evidence that any of the U.S.'s enemies have access to such technology, although two agencies did accept that the technology is at least possible. The bigger problem with the energy weapon theory is, what's the point? Havana syndrome is unpleasant to experience, but it doesn't kill. In the grand scheme of things, it's a diplomatic annoyance. Why would an enemy state dedicate considerable resources just to make a few diplomats feel ill? There's no sign of a bigger game plan at work. Likewise, chemical exposure seems unlikely. Thorough investigations have been carried out at each site where the syndrome has been experienced with no evidence of toxins being found. Until chemicals that cause such effects are discovered at a Havana syndrome site, this theory can be ruled out. Surveillance equipment also seems like a poor explanation. We live in a world where we're surrounded by a whole spectrum of wireless signals. The vast majority of us report no ill effects, despite what some Facebook groups might say about 5G. That leaves us with Havana syndrome being a mass psychogenic illness. This is entirely possible, but medical experts have said much more research needs to be done in the field before this can be singled out as the cause. The U.S. government is unlikely to want to admit its diplomats suffer from mass hysteria, so it's easy to foresee pushback on this being declared the cause. The 2023 report concluded that there is no one explanation for Havana syndrome. Instead, it's most likely the result of everything from environmental and social factors to pre-existing medical conditions. Investigators found that some of the buildings had faulty HVAC systems and mice infestations that may have played a role. The U.S. government seems determined to rule out the idea that a foreign adversary is using electromagnetic energy waves to sicken Americans. Which, to be fair, does seem the least probable cause at this point. Not everyone agrees though, and speculation is sure to continue. In these uncertain times, it feels less likely than ever that we'll get an official answer as to what causes this strange syndrome.